February 17th, 2012, northern Sweden. Two men on snowmobiles are cruising down an isolated forest track. This road hasn't been used all winter. It's buried under more than 3 feet of solid, compacted snow. They notice something strange, a slight bump in the otherwise perfect white landscape. Maybe an old car wreck from the summer, they think. Curiosity pulls them closer. They stop their engines. The silence is absolute. They start digging. They shovel away heavy layers of snow, eventually hitting the dark metal roof of a car. They keep digging, clearing the side window. One man wipes away the thick frost and peers inside. He jumps back, shouting to his friend. There is movement inside the car. It's not an animal. In the back seat, buried in a filthy sleeping bag, is a man. He looks like a skeleton. His skin is gray, stretched tight over his bones. His eyes are sunken deep into his skull, and he's barely breathing. This man is alive. The rescuers force the door open. The man inside tries to speak, but his voice is just a broken, weak whisper. He manages to tell them his name, Peter Skyllberg. And then he says something that defies all logic. He claims he has been trapped in this car without any food whatsoever since December 19th. That's 60 days. 2 whole months. Surviving 60 days without food is medically unheard of. Surviving 60 days in a frozen tomb? It defies science. Peter Skyllberg should be a frozen corpse, but he's not. And the story of how he endured the impossible and the terrifying physical transformation his body underwent to keep him alive is one of the most extreme survival cases ever recorded. You won't be able to look away until you understand how this man refused to die. To understand how Peter ended up trapped, you first have to understand the desperation that drove him into the wilderness. Peter wasn't an adventurer. He wasn't testing his limits. He was a 44-year-old man whose life had completely collapsed. A year before the incident, Peter was living a normal life in central Sweden. He worked in the building trade, but things went wrong. Fast. He fell into massive debt. Reports later confirmed he owed over 1.6 million Swedish kroner, around $150,000. The pressure was immense. Creditors were calling, and he was losing his home. The financial ruin led directly to personal ruin. His long-term girlfriend, the person he relied on most, couldn't handle the stress. They broke up. Peter was also estranged from his own family. He hadn't spoken to his father or close relatives in nearly 20 years. He had no safety net. He hit rock bottom. He lost his home, his partner, and his hope. So, Peter started living in his car. He wasn't driving into the woods to go camping, he was driving to the woods to disappear. In mid-December 2011, Peter loaded his car with the few possessions he had left. A sleeping bag, warm winter clothing, some cigarettes, and a small amount of soda and sweets. He started driving north. Far north. He ended up near Umeå, a harsh, remote region edging towards the Arctic Circle. On December 19th, Peter turned off the main highway and onto a narrow, unmaintained logging track. It was the kind of road that vanishes when the snow comes. He drove deep into the forest, miles from civilization. It was a perfect place to hide from the world. He parked the car. Snow was already falling. What Peter didn't anticipate was the intensity of the weather. The snowfall quickly accelerated into a severe blizzard. The wind howled, creating massive drifts. Within 24 hours, the car wasn't just stuck, it was buried. When Peter woke up, he was in near total darkness. The windows were blocked by solid white. He tried the doors. They wouldn't budge. The weight of the snow was immense. He tried to dig himself out, but it was useless. The snow was just too deep and too heavy. He was entombed. The first week was a fight against claustrophobia and panic. He was trapped in a steel box barely bigger than a coffin. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the sound of his own labored breathing. He had a crucial decision to make early on. the engine. Running the car would provide heat, but it would burn his limited fuel, and more dangerously, if the exhaust pipe was blocked by the snow, which it certainly was, running the engine would fill the cabin with toxic carbon monoxide, killing him silently in minutes. Peter realized this danger. He ran the engine only in very short bursts, just enough to take the edge off the extreme cold before shutting it down again. But eventually, the fuel ran out. The engine clicked, dead. Now his only source of heat was his own body. The meager supplies he had, the sweets and soda, were gone within the first few days. Then the real hunger began. It was a grinding, agonizing pain that consumes your every thought. He had no food, but he desperately needed water. You die in days without water. His only source was the snow around him. He managed to crack a window open just a few centimeters, enough to reach out and scoop snow into the car. He ate the snow to survive. But this survival strategy carries a hidden danger. Eating snow actually makes you colder. Your body has to burn precious energy to melt the snow and raise it to body temperature. Peter was burning calories that he couldn't afford to lose. He was getting colder and weaker just by trying to stay hydrated. It was a desperate trade-off. As December turned into January, the Arctic winter tightened its grip. The temperature outside the car plummeted. -10, -20, then -30 degrees Celsius. Inside the car, Peter's world shrank. The interior surfaces were coated in a thick layer of frost. Every breath he took crystallized in the air. He retreated to the back seat, wrapping himself in the sleeping bag and every piece of clothing that he owned. He stopped moving. Movement was wasted energy, after all. His body began to consume itself. When starved, the body first burns through its glycogen stores. Then it moves on to fat reserves, and once the fat is gone, the body turns to muscle and tissue. Peter was wasting away. The isolation was absolute. He had no phone signal, no way to call for help, and given his circumstances, he likely believed no one was looking for him. No one even knew he was missing. As far as the world was concerned, Peter Skyllberg didn't exist. He spent his days in a haze of cold and hunger. He smoked the cigarettes he had brought, the small ember a tiny comfort in the darkness. The car interior became foul, stinking of smoke and his own deteriorating body. But Peter was beyond caring. He was losing his grip on reality. Time became meaningless. The only light was a faint, eerie blue glow filtering through the thick snow during the short daylight hours. Days and nights blended together in the perpetual twilight. He started having hallucinations, visions brought on by starvation and extreme cold. He thought about the past, the life he had lost, the mistakes that had led him here. He was too weak to even scoop snow anymore. He just lay there, waiting for the end. He was dying, slowly and agonizingly. By the beginning of February, Peter had been without food for 6 weeks. By medical standards, he should already be dead. Most humans can survive without food for about 30 to 40 days, but that's under ideal conditions. In sub-zero temperatures, survival time is drastically shorter. So how was he still alive? When doctors later examined Peter, they realized he had been saved by a combination of environmental luck and a profound biological miracle. The first miracle was the snow itself. The very thing that trapped him also saved him. It's a phenomenon known as the Igloo Effect. Snow might seem cold, but it's actually an incredible insulator. It's made up of ice crystals and millions of tiny trapped air pockets. These air pockets slow down the transfer of heat. The 3 feet of snow covering Peter's car created a protective shell around it. While the temperature outside was a lethal -30 Celsius, the temperature inside the car, insulated by the snow, likely stabilized around 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the freezing point, certainly not comfortable, but survivable if you are well wrapped in a sleeping bag and winter clothes, which Peter was. His own minimal body heat was trapped inside. The car had become a makeshift igloo. But the Igloo Effect only explains why he didn't freeze solid. It doesn't explain how he survived without food for 60 days. This is where the second, more astonishing factor comes into play. Peter's body essentially shut down. Doctors theorize that Peter entered a state similar to hibernation, known as torpor. When faced with extreme cold and prolonged starvation, the human body can sometimes trigger a drastic survival mechanism. It slows down the metabolism to an absolute minimum. It's a state of controlled hypothermia. Peter's body temperature dropped from the normal 37 degrees Celsius down to around 31 degrees Celsius, or 88 Fahrenheit. Because his body was colder, it needed significantly less energy to function. His heart rate slowed to a crawl, his breathing became shallow. He wasn't just sleeping, he was in a state of suspended animation. Like a bear in winter, his body conserved every last calorie. He was like dormant. Dr. Stefan Brandt, one of the physicians who analyzed the case, suggested that Peter's body adapted to the low temperature, a bit like a bear that hibernates. Humans can do that. Due to the low temperature, not much energy was used up. This involuntary hibernation is incredibly rare in humans. It's a last-ditch biological defense against certain death. If Peter had been warmer, his metabolism would have been faster, and he would have starved to death in weeks. The cold, paradoxically, preserved his life by slowing down the process of dying. But even in hibernation, the body still uses energy. By February 17th, Peter was at the absolute limit. He had consumed almost all of his body mass. He likely had only hours or maybe a day left before his organs finally failed. This was when he heard it. The rumble of engines. The two snowmobilers hadn't planned to be heroes. They were just out exploring the winter landscape. If they had taken a different path, if they hadn't been curious about the bump in the snow, Peter would never have been found. His car was invisible from the main road. When they looked through the window and saw the emaciated figure in the back seat, they were horrified. One later told reporters, "We thought it was a wrecked car, but then I saw movement in the back seat." They quickly cleared the door and tried to communicate with Peter. They were shocked by the state he was in. He was so weak he couldn't stand. He couldn't even sit up properly. He was in a very, very poor state, one of the rescuers said. He couldn't speak, he was just trembling. When Peter managed to whisper that he had been there since December, the rescuers simply couldn't believe it. It seemed impossible. They immediately called emergency services, realizing that this was a critical life-or-death situation. Police and rescue teams arrived, but the extraction was difficult. The car was deep in the forest. They had to use specialized tracked vehicles to reach the site. When the police arrived, they too assumed the man must have been there for a day or two at most, but when Peter repeated his claim, they thought he was delirious. They knew they had to move him with extreme care. When a person is in such a profound state of hypothermia and starvation, rescuing them can actually be dangerous. There's a phenomenon known as re-warming shock or rescue collapse. If the body is warmed up too quickly or even just moved roughly, the cold, stagnant blood from the limbs can rush back to the core, shocking the fragile heart and causing immediate cardiac arrest. The rescue team wrapped Peter in specialized warming blankets and carefully transported him to Umeå University Hospital. At the hospital, the medical staff were stunned. Dr. Ulf Neslund, a senior doctor at the hospital, called it the case of a lifetime. He had never seen anything like it. Peter was severely malnourished, dehydrated, and hypothermic. He had lost an estimated 35 to 40 kilograms, around 77 to 88 pounds. The doctors immediately began the delicate process of bringing him back. They started by gradually raising the body's temperature degree by degree. They also had to combat refeeding syndrome. When a body is starved for that long, introducing too many nutrients too quickly can cause a fatal cascade of metabolic failures. They had to feed him nutrient-rich liquids intravenously in tiny amounts at first. Slowly, agonizingly, Peter started to come back to life. The news of the miracle man spread around the world. It was a sensation. How could a man survive 60 days in a frozen car? The media descended on the hospital, desperate for interviews. Scientists debated the hibernation theory, survival experts analyzed his actions, but there was also skepticism. Some experts questioned the timeline. Was it really 60 days? They argued that the human body simply cannot last that long. They suggested he must have had hidden supplies. But the police investigation confirmed Peter's story. The car was searched. Only cigarette butts, comic books, and empty wrappers were found. There were no footprints around the car, the snow covering the vehicle was undisturbed, the physical state of Peter was exactly consistent with extreme long-term starvation. The evidence overwhelmingly supported the impossible truth. While the world debated the science, Peter Skyllberg wasn't interested in the fame. He refused almost all requests for interviews, book deals, movie offers. He wasn't interested. He remained intensely private about what had happened and why he was in the woods in the first place. This silence only deepened the mystery. If he went into the woods to escape life, how did he find the will to endure 60 days of agony? Some speculated that while he may have initially given up, the primary instinct for survival is hardwired. Even when the conscious mind surrenders, the body sometimes refuses to die. Others believe that the hibernation state meant he wasn't consciously fighting at all. He was simply existing in a deep trance. After several weeks in the hospital, Peter made a remarkable physical recovery. Astonishingly, he suffered no permanent physical damage, no severe frostbite, no organ failure. His body, having shut down to protect itself, slowly rebooted. During his recovery, his estranged family heard the news. His father, who hadn't spoken to him in 2 decades, came to the hospital. The ordeal, as horrific as it was, offered a brief moment of reconnection. But the underlying problems that drove Peter into the woods, the debts, the isolation, didn't just disappear. The Swedish Enforcement Administration eventually wrote off much of what he owed, but his life was still fractured. Once he was discharged from the hospital, faced with overwhelming media attention and the pressures of his previous life, Peter Skyllberg did exactly what he had intended to do in the first place. He disappeared. He moved away from Umeå, avoiding the public eye. He sought the isolation he had originally looked for, but this time on his own terms. He managed to vanish from public record, seeking a quiet, private life far from the forest where he spent 60 days in a frozen tomb. Peter Skyllberg survived the impossible, and now he just wants to live. A quiet victory after the loudest storm. You won't believe what the people in these next 2 stories did to survive. Click now to see what they did to stay alive, and ask yourself, could you do the same? Subscribe for more, and I'll see you soon.